Welcome to the Library of Congress, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Nikki Hernandez. I'm on the development team, and we are so thrilled to present tonight's program to you. But first, I must thank our friends of the library and the Madison Council for their incredible generosity. Private support like yours helps the Library of Congress broaden its reach and continue to grow its unparalleled collection, so we thank you for that. And if you're here tonight and you're not a friend, we invite you to become a member and join the community that supports the nation's library. You can visit our website at loc.gov/friends or grab any one of us to learn how you too can support the library. We'd love to talk to you all about it. And we really can't thank you enough for being with us tonight to celebrate the newly acquired Stephen Sondheim Collection. Tonight's program will consist of a great conversation with a quick audience Q&A, so hang on to your questions till then, and that will be followed by 3 musical performances. After the program, we invite you to stick around for a reception and enjoy the collections if you didn't get a chance to see them on your way in. So without further ado, it's now my pleasure to introduce our Acting Librarian of Congress, Robert R. Newland.
Well, thank you, Nikki, and good evening to everyone. How is everyone tonight? Good. Ready for a fun evening? It's definitely going to be a fun evening. We got this in right under the wire. I just want all of you to be out of the building by 11:59. I don't know who chose this date. Nick Brown, did you choose this date? It was a team effort. Well, I have to say the team must have had a great crystal ball because it could not have been timed better. So I'm so happy to be here to help celebrate the Stephen Sondheim Collection. First, I want to extend thanks, as Nikki did, to the Friends of the Library of Congress and to our wonderful, loyal members of the Madison Council, and I'd like to give them applause. They are both so important to our ongoing work here. We really, really value you greatly. So, we can all thank, I feel like a drum roll here, we can all thank one person for making this evening possible, and that is Mark Horowitz, who was this, yes. I'd make him stand, but he's going to be up here later, who, as we all know, is a senior music specialist in the music division and one of the world's foremost experts on Stephen Sondheim. Mark is a shining example of the important work our curators do day to day to build relationships on behalf of the library. And staff like Mark are one of the reasons I decided to come out of retirement and come back to the library, because I love working with this staff. They share the same passion and love of this institution, and it's a real privilege to work with them. Mark first hosted Stephen Sondheim at the library for a display in 1993. Wow. And he wowed them so much that the maestro quickly decided the library was the best home for his creative legacy. Mark later authored Sondheim on Music, Minor Details and Major Decisions, which is based on his extensive interviews with Sondheim that are available on video at loc.gov. Mark was just reminding me of another wonderful evening we had when once again he brought the Marvin Hamlish papers to the Library of Congress. What a wonderful evening that was. Stephen Sondheim's work redefined the American musical, and we are honored to now be the home of the collection that reflects the depth of his genius. This treasure trove, and this really astounded me, consists of 17,000 manuscripts, drafts, sketches, recordings, notebooks, and scrapbooks, all now preserved for researchers, scholars, and theater lovers for generations to come. Stephen Sondheim wasn't just a composer and a lyricist. He was a storyteller, an innovator, and a chronicler of the human condition. This collection is more than an archive. It's a creative roadmap revealing how the ideas, words, and music we know and love came to life. And I missed something here. I did. Somebody that we do need to thank very much, and that's John Cobbfleisch and our wonderful performance this evening. Thank you, John. Okay, I'm glad I caught that one. So this acquisition deepens the richness of the library's already world-class theater collection, home to the papers of George and Ira Gershwin, Irving Berlin, Bob Fosse, Mary Rogers, and now Stephen Sondheim. To help us reflect on the significance of this moment for the library, for the arts, and for future generations, we're joined tonight by two very special speakers, Bob Mondello, arts critic at NPR, and Mark Horowitz, senior music specialist here at the library. And now I'll turn it over to Bob and Mark.
And now I have to figure out how to use a microphone, which should be easy. Hello, sir.
Hi. Hello, everybody.
I had the great privilege of talking to Mark about this collection just a few months ago, when it first came here. And there, at NPR, there is a collection of Sondheim fanatics, which includes Susan Stamberg and Ari Shapiro and Scott Simon, and all of them are jealous of me because I got to look at this stuff before anybody else did. Pardon me? They're going to, trust me. But they've all interviewed Sondheim, right? I mean, so anyway, they were very excited that I had seen the original manuscripts about A Little Priest, for instance, as indeed was I. You have just been introduced as someone who brought the collection here. How did you first meet Mr. Sondheim?
I actually first met him in 1980. I wrote him a letter when I was in college and asked to meet with him when I was going to New York. And he kindly agreed. I don't know why. It was my favorite memory from the meeting was I asked him, other than his own works, what works of recent vintage was he a fan of? And he said, The Wiz. And he saw the look of shock on my face, and he said, I'll tell you why. There are three primary reasons. One, the staging of the tornado I thought was brilliant. Two, the song Ease On Down the Road. Do you know the word prosody? And I shook my head, I have no idea. And he said, prosody is the way a lyric sits on a piece of music, and that lyric was born to sit on that piece of music, and you have no idea how hard that is. And the third thing was the song Home, which he said made him cry every time he heard it. And he said, I could never write anything that sentimental, and we always tend to admire that most, which we could not do ourselves. So that was my first meeting with him.
Wow. I would not have expected that. How did you get to know him after that? Because that was you were in
1980.
Yeah.
It was years later. I was working at Arena Stage, and I'd been there for several years. And I took a leave of absence from my regular job there to work on a production of A Merrily We Roll Along. And I actually became very good friends with George Firth, who was around throughout the whole rehearsal process. But Steve came down a few times, mostly the last week. My favorite memory from that was he was writing some new lyrics, and he asked if I had a rhyming dictionary he could borrow. So I rushed home, got my rhyming dictionary, brought it back to him. And when he gave it back to me after writing some new lyrics, he said, just so you know, I wrote in some missing words, which he had in fact done. But he never remembered that original meeting in 1980, but he did know me from that time. So when I contacted him later, he knew who I was.
That's very nice. And is that part of the reason that that he, is that how you seduced him into coming to the library?
The way I seduced him, I wouldn't call it a seduction exactly. He was coming to town to get a Helen Hayes Lifetime Achievement Award. So I wrote him a letter saying, "Dear Steve, I'm now working at the library and I see you're coming to town and I'd love to invite you for a show and tell at the library. I think I can guarantee you a moving experience." And he agreed, to my great pleasure. And so I spent, I think, literally a month preparing for that visit. He was on, there was a radio program in England called Desert Island Discs, and he'd been on it twice, and they'd published the lists of what his favorite works were. And it turned out we had several of the manuscripts. Like Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra was one of the manuscripts on his list. And even if we didn't have the exact manuscript, we certainly had something by that composer. So there was Stravinsky and Ravel and Brahms, and then there were several things that related directly to him. His mentor had been Oscar Hammerstein. We had the Oscar Hammerstein collection. He'd collaborated with Richard Rodgers on Do I Hear a Waltz? We had that material. Most importantly, probably, I suspect everybody here knows, he wrote West Side Story with Leonard Bernstein, and we had the Leonard Bernstein collection. So it was a combination of, classical composers and then things that had direct relationships to him. And the last thing I brought out was Gershwin's Porgy and Bess. And that's when he started to cry, and I think that's when he made the decision emotionally to leave his papers to us.
All right, and how did you know that would make him cry? Come on, you did. And
I'd heard him speak enough about how meaningful that show was to him. And, I know it was a favorite score of his, and I just, come on, it's Porgy and Bess. You just know it has to do that.
I have read about him that and I've heard him in raw tape of interviews and things like that, where it's clear that he doesn't think he belongs in the same category as Gershwin, that Gershwin is somehow brilliant and that he was a craftsman by comparison. And I don't believe that. And I'm guessing you don't believe that. And please tell me that at some point he realized that he belongs in that pantheon with Stravinsky and Gershwin and those guys.
I think I convinced him. I think the one thing he was maybe a little self-conscious about was that he wasn't an orchestrator. Huh. And that was the sort of the one difference, was that he didn't orchestrate his music.
Okay.
But I think I think he had a fairly healthy view of himself and his talent, as evidenced by the song God up front there.
Well, and Stravinsky's lyrics were terrible.
Exactly, yes.
All right, so that was enough to talk him into coming to the library? Was that it?
I got a letter from him within a month or so saying he was getting ready to change his will. And then he sent me the language that he put in his will with the bequest. So, yes.
Okay, so it was a result of that conversation.
That meeting, yeah.
That's great. That's a legacy, sir.
Well, I mean, I spent the next 30 years worrying that he'd change his mind. So.
Fair. Now, you did a series of interviews with him, so you got to know him reasonably well. And I take it you did them in his home.
246 East 49th Street, next to Katharine Hepburn.
Very nice.
Yes.
And you talked to him for hours and hours, and I have seen hours of that because I came to the library's series. There were 6 lectures on it. I think that were edited versions of those. Is that right?
Not exactly.
No, I'm getting it wrong.
I did 6 lectures when the Kennedy Center did their Sondheim celebration, and as part of the lectures, I would show clips from the interviews.
Gotcha. Okay. So I have seen snippets of it then.
Yes, but they're online. So which we did after. They weren't until after he passed away, but now there's 6.5 hours of them online.
And you also worked. You wrote the book about him, about his music, Minor Details and Major Decisions, and you worked with him on his books. Am I remembering that correctly from our talk?
I was a reader for his lyric books, so he would send me chapters as he finished them for input, which was very intimidating.
I was going to say.
The thing I'm proudest of was reminding him of lyrics he'd forgotten to include. And the biggest one was he'd forgotten several lyrics that he'd written for the film version of A Little Night Music. And when I wrote him, I said, Steve, did you really mean to not include this? And I quoted some of it, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I never saw that before in my life. So fortunately, the scene was on YouTube, and I sent him the link to the clip. And he did one of it's happened a few times where he sort of gets very embarrassed and apologizes and sort of hat in hand and, blames age and memory and stuff like that. But yeah, it was thrilling to get those chapters as they
I can imagine.
came.
Is there, you're seeing this collection now. You had seen his papers, I guess, at his apartment or his home. And you told me that they were on wooden shelves.
You're talking.
Yeah, there was a fire.
Yeah. I'd seen the manuscripts earlier, and then in 1995 or 7, he had a fire. Now, the fire started in the office, and it was a closet right off the office, wooden shelves, cardboard boxes, music manuscripts in the boxes. When I went back a year later after they'd refurbished things from the fire, when the boxes that had been on the bottom shelves, when I picked up the manuscripts outside the boxes, there were singe marks outlining where the paper sat in the boxes. So it is truly the one time in my life where I think I've seen a miracle, because there's no logical reason why paper and cardboard on wood, inches from a fire that melted CDs together, didn't go up in flames. And I can only thank some divine intervention for that. And actually, if you look at the manuscripts now, I hadn't realized how many have just smoke damage just around the edges. And you can, if you look for it, you'll see it on several of the things back there.
It's terrifying.
After it, he had a cinder block vault built in his basement. And seriously, no, he did.
He knew this was valuable stuff he had. That is encouraging.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Besides donating his papers, did he have other interactions here with the library?
It was pretty cool. He did research here. When he was working on the show that started as Wise Guys Became Bounce and then ultimately became Roadshow, he and John Weidman came down and they were looking at early vaudeville films, they trained me to do the reels so that I could get ahead of them. I had 2 players and I would go get them set up on one, and then I'd run and take the old reel off the other one and put a new one on so they could go back and forth as quickly as possible. And he actually had me do some other research for him. And over the years, he'd have me do various things. One thing, he asked me if I could copy the entire Munchkinland sequence from The Wizard of Oz, because he had an idea to write a song parody for somebody for their birthday. And as far as I can tell, nothing ever happened with it, which is because I was hoping when the collection came we would find such a thing, but no evidence of it. But
you mentioned Bounds. Excuse me. They recorded that at the old building of NPR.
yes, I was there.
You were there?
Yeah.
I didn't know you at the time. And they told us we were not to speak to him. He was there, and the whole cast was there. I remember Richard Kind wandering the hallways nervously as he was about to sing. It had been playing at the Kennedy Center for a few weeks, and it was pretty clear it was not going further with this iteration. And we were instructed not only not to speak to him, but not to make eye contact with him. And I got to tell you, that's the most painful thing in the world, right? I revere this man, and I'd never spoken to him. I've never got a chance, and I did at one point make eye contact with him. I was very pleased. He saw me. I don't know what he thought, but he looked back down, and that was the end of that. So
I'll tell you about that. Before that, we had done our 70th birthday concert at the library. And Nathan Lane sang a song written for Wise Guys called A Little House for Mama that was cut and wasn't in Bounce. And we had it orchestrated for our concert by Jonathan Tunick. They did the recording of Bounce at NPR for over 2 days. And at one point, I forget what happened, but I said, you know, I have the orchestrations and the parts in my office if you want to add that to the CD. And so I rushed back to the library, got the parts. They ran it down with the orchestra and recorded it, and it's on the CD. So because of me, there's an extra track.
You have a real legacy, sir.
There you go.
This is like amazing. What was the biggest surprise in this? I mean, you do know his work pretty well.
In the collection, you mean?
Yeah, in the collection. You've received it. You've been going through it for months now. What was the thing that just sort of stuck out for you that was a surprise?
There are two answers to that. One, there was a handful of very specific things that I just didn't know exist, because there are the lyric books and there are websites and things that list all his works. And there were things, and I thought I knew at least every title, even if I didn't know what the work itself was. But there were several things, several of them we put out tonight for you guys, like the When You Tell a Joke number and the French Waltz and things like that. But I think the thing that got me emotionally was just really seeing the sheer volume of sketching, the dozens and dozens and dozens of pages and the meticulousness of it. And I'd looked at a lot of the sketches before, but just seeing them in that sheer quantity and the intensity. And the other thing that surprised me was it's clear the older he got, the more sketching he did. You know, for Company, the first real show, I think there are 3 sheet music boxes of materials. For Follies, there are 6. For Into the Woods, there are 9. For Sunday in the Park, there are 12. I mean, there's sort of an exponential growth. And I don't know if it was as he got older, he became more insecure and wanted to work things through further, or just became more meticulous, or
Maybe had more ideas.
But
I mean,
it's one of the things I so regret that the collection came as a bequest, not while he was still alive, so I couldn't ask him. There's so many times I wish I could ask him specific questions. So, yeah. Steve, if you're listening.
One of the nice things that happened when we were doing the interview for NPR was that I learned that you had counted up the number of professions that he had decided to bake into meat pies for Mrs. Lovett, and it was
156, I think.
Now I counted. There are 32 in the song. So that's a lot, right? And as you're listening to it, it's extraordinary. But Gigolo is one. I don't know what you rhyme with that.
Well, my favorite one is on the 5th page, and I think it's one of the page of the lyric sketches we have out there. One of the professions is rabbi, but then a few pages later, he actually puts it in a couplet, which is he has everybody shaves except rabbis and riffraff.
It's very nice. There was, I had another thing. Never mind, I've lost it. Looking at that, I remember what it was. My favorite line from the song was added after it had been printed, after it was typed. And it was the shepherd's pie.
Peppered with actual shepherd on top?
Yeah. That wasn't in the original drafts, and you showed me the typed version of that with that line penned in.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I was kind of blown away by that, because that's like the most remarkable line in the piece, right? And
you know what that reminds me of? One of the other discoveries like that. For a given song, there may be sometimes 40 pages of lyric sketches and then another 20 pages of typescript lyric sheets with annotations. So it's like he never really quite gives up on the song. And for the song Barcelona from Company, I was shocked. It was on one of the typescripts where it was Bobby sings, Barbara, and she sings April, and he's crossed out Barbara, and above it written June. So I always assumed that
It's a great joke.
That
and yes,
that was almost the point of the song, and the fact that was a
he couldn't remember the name.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very nice. Going through this stuff with you was so much fun. The looking at the way he constructed things, and you used a phrase, it was the perspiration behind the inspiration, that he was working so hard to do something that sounds so effortless when it's finally there, right? I mean, his lyrics sound so conversational, it doesn't occur to you that there's another way to do them. And
Well, it's not only the lyrics, though. I've been here 34 years. I've worked on dozens of collections. I've never seen a composer who does so many music sketches, too. A dozen pages for a song of just, ideas of melodies, harmonies, accompaniment figures. It's remarkable.
yeah. You told me, and I don't know if you want me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, that you and your wife have a secret Sondheim language. That he looks surprised, but he told me this, that sometimes when one of you is driving the other one crazy.
Oh, do 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 do. Doesn't everybody do that? Come on, some of you must.
Let me see. Are there scraps in there of a show that he didn't end up doing that you can tantalize us with? I mean, did he work on a version of Wicked? Was there something he ever tried that and never brought to fruition?
There are a couple of shows that he worked on that never got produced. One was meant to be a companion piece to Passion. It was going to be 2 one-acts, and it was Muscle, about a bodybuilder. And there's one long, extensive number he wrote for that. And then he worked on a film musical called Singing Out Loud, and there's several songs for that. And it's fascinating stuff. It's very meta, I guess is the word, in terms of the way the songs work with what's happening on film. There's this huge one number called Lunch that takes place in a Hollywood restaurant, and the song intersperses their conversation with the voiceovers of what everybody's thinking, and while the waiters interject and stuff like that.
Kind of cool. It's like the early number in Merrily We Roll Along, where people are talking over.
No, it's nothing.
It's nothing like that. Okay. I try to make these connections. It's like,
It was a good attempt. I appreciate it.
the little things we do together, right?
Oh, thank you.
Do not reward me for those. Not a day goes by that I don't wonder. So now that the collection is here at the library, and it's been available to
3
grad
months.
students and things for 3 months.
It's been available for 3 months, and it's been incredibly gratifying. I think we're breaking records. I counted on Thursday of last week, we'd had 252 call slips submitted for the collection in the 3 months we've been serving it. To give you a sense, the most heavily used collection in the library last year was the NAACP collection in the manuscript division, and that had 425 over the entire year. So if we keep this up, it's going to eclipse any other collection I think we've ever gotten. But it's not just the number of people, it's there was one couple who came on their honeymoon. There have been more than one person who they had to bring them Kleenex because they started crying. I've seen people literally sort of shaking when they open a box and open a folder and start looking at something. So it's really been thrilling and gratifying to see the response from people who are taking advantage of the collection. It's why we do what we do. And the other thing that thrilled me is there have been at least 2 people who've come who are composers, and they wanted to learn from him how he approached composition. So I feel like he's passing on a legacy there too. So it's not just scholarship.
Well, and he brought other people to. Wasn't Jonathan Larson one of the people that his collection arrived here because Sondheim
Sort of. I wanted to go after the Larson collection, and I knew there had been some interactions with Steve, and I sent him a note or a letter or something, and he said, "You can tell his parents that I support this," or something like that, and so I did that. But because of him, we got the Hal Prince collection. Because of him, we got the Arthur Lawrence collection, and I know he talked us up to Julie Andrews, and I hope we get her collection. So he was a big supporter, and because of him, the legacy has been extended and enriched.
I did a piece one time about my idea for a fantasy Follies, that they would do Follies on television the way that they did Sound of Music and Grease and Peter Pan and things like that. And my idea was that if you did it on TV and you only did it for one day, you could get all these famous people to do the thing, right? I mean, that they wouldn't commit to a run on Broadway, but that they would do this one thing. And one of the things I did was I went and found a whole bunch of different versions of I'm Still Here. And one of them was Barbra Streisand, and it was clear that Sondheim had written new lyrics for her. And I'm delighted to see that it's out there, the list of things that she wrote to him, she wanted him to consider, and the number one thing was My Nose, which I thought was kind of great. But that she wanted him to rewrite that for her specifically was sort of magical. And to see that, it was...
Yeah, that was an unexpected delight to see.
I was going to say. All right, I can't top that. Do you want to open to the audience for questions?
Sure.
Do you want me to walk around with? You have a mic. Am I timing this reasonably well, or should I be going on and on?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. So we are open to questions. If you have one, raise your hand, and we will bring you a mic. Oh, I see one. Do by running. 1 second.
Okay, this is the library, so I feel tempted to pose a research challenge, because there is that wonderful song written for a WNET auction that you captioned was won by the young Frank Bolger. Now,
Right.
The name Bolger raises, over the rainbow bells of some relation to Ray Bolger, and I talked to Janet, and she said, "You've researched that. You haven't found any connection." But
What I
young Frank
found-
Bolger, yes.
I found the guy's brother, and just by going on Facebook or something, searching for Bolger, I forget exactly how I did it. And we had a brief correspondence, and I begged him to put me in touch with his actual brother, and he said he would, and he contacted his brother, who said he'd talk to me, but later. So, because the other thing that's amazing with that are all the letters from Frank to Sondheim about his mother, telling him all these things about her and giving him ideas for what the song could be about. And they're very funny, charming letters that are in the collection.
I'm going to go, that's going to be my call slip. But you didn't find any relation to Ray Bolger?
To be honest, I never asked about that.
Research needs to be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
More to come on that. All right. Another one down here. If you wouldn't mind passing that over.
From a perspective of how many boxes related to a given show, was Merrily We Roll Along, it's been reworked and reworked so many times. Did you have many more volumes or boxes related to that show, or how did that come in the lead? Or
It's not the most. It's certainly up there. Janet McKinney, my colleague, might remember more specifically how many boxes there are, but I want to say something like 9 maybe. But
so which show did have the most boxes associated with it?
I think, frankly, there was one show that we couldn't separate, so we did Wise Guys Bouncin' Road Show as one entity. And we just did one straight alpha run for all the song titles that went in and out, the various iterations of that. And that had the most boxes.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
You mentioned that Katharine Hepburn was his next door neighbor. Did he write anything about her or to her, and did they correspond in any way?
We found 2 notes from her in the collection, one of which we can't read her handwriting. My favorite story, which he told me, and it's actually on the video that was circulating, was he was writing Company, and I believe he was writing The Ladies Who Lunch, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was, "Here's to the ladies," and just pounding away at the piano and stuff, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the dining room window, and there's this woman in the cold in a babushka, barefoot, and it's her complaining about the noise he's making. And so then he got an electric piano from then on, but he said, he heard that shortly after she was in rehearsals for Coco at the time, and she would complain to the people, I'm late for rehearsal because I couldn't sleep last night because this terrible neighbor next door was pounding away at the piano. And so that's the best I can tell you about Katharine Hepburn.
All right. Oh, another one over here. Did you have one? Yeah. Okay, great. And then I'll come to you.
Sure. Hey, Mark. Will Garcher, good to see you.
Hi, Will.
I have a horribly unfair question for you, which is, what is your favorite Stephen Sondheim score?
Sunday in the Park with George.
You just right out. That's good.
It means a lot to me for a lot of reasons. And in fact, I met my wife. We were both working at Arena Stage, and I'd been there for a few years, and it was her first day there, and she was setting up her office, and I went into the office, and she'd hung up a poster for Sunday in the Park in front of her desk. So I looked at the poster and looked at her, and the first things I said to her was, "I love you." Seriously. And I didn't, it was months later when we started going out. She said, "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" I said, "No," but it made an impression. But I do think the lyric, "I chosen my life was shaken, so what, the choice may have been mistaken, the choosing was not," is the most powerful lyric I've ever heard, and it's literally changed my life. It's given me the courage to make life decisions that I don't know that I would have been able to make without them.
Mark?
Yes.
It's Mike. Aside from The Wiz, what shows did Sondheim admire?
It's funny, that just came up with somebody in conversation. He wouldn't really talk publicly about his favorite shows because I think he didn't want to embarrass colleagues and stuff if he didn't say positive things about their shows. I have seen letters from him praising people to themselves. Like in our Howard Ashman collection, he writes something of a fan letter about after seeing Little Shop of Horrors. But I don't know what, he was a famous theater goer, cried easily, clapped loudly, laughed hard. But it's mostly I've heard him talk about straight plays rather than musicals, so I don't know.
But he liked a lot of, he mentored composers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know he was a big fan of Jason Robert Brown's Honeymoon in Vegas, is it? Because he said, I Love Betsy, he said it's the best opening number since The Music Man.
All right, we're going to do these last 2 questions.
When a collection comes to the library, I'm sure that there are things that you have to do to get it ready for inclusion in the library. Can you compare what you had to do for the Sondheim collection with other collections? Was it more of a challenge? Was it well organized already coming in, that sort of thing?
Well, I have to give a shout out to 2 colleagues, Janet McKinney and Ellie Hart, and the 3 of us. We've never processed a collection so quickly. Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Ellie. They're both back there, and it was a joint effort, and I think we were so enthusiastic that we just enjoyed every minute of it, I want to say, at least I did. And so it didn't feel like work, really. And it did come fairly well organized, yes.
Phil, here you go.
Yes. What's the story about Sondheim's final show? I don't think it was ever formally done. Is that so?
Well, it's
I saw it off Broadway.
Oh, you did.
It's called Here We Are.
but no. It's funny because his manuscripts call it the show Buñuel, and it was based on two Buñuel films, The Exterminating Angel and The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. But he died before he finished the score for it. So there's basically songs for the first act, and I think only 1.5 or 2 numbers for the second, and they filled it out with incidental music. So it's sort of a hybrid, but they have produced it, and they just produced it in London too.